The palace lake shimmered beneath the autumn sun, its surface as polished as glass, reflecting the towering spires of the royal estate. Noblemen in velvet coats, noblewomen in gowns heavy with pearls, and servants lining the edges stood waiting for the afternoon ceremony. The Duke of Arlesmere, Julian, sat tall in his carriage as it rolled across the gravel path. But the truth was cruelly obvious to all who watched him: his body was broken. His left leg dragged uselessly, his gait unsteady. Whispers followed him as they always did. "The crippled Duke," one voice hissed. "Barely fit to rule," another murmured. "Unmarried still, who would have him?" Julian ignored them. He had long since taught himself to wear silence like armor, though inside, he bled with every word. His father's enemies had called him weak since birth, his peers mocked the way he limped, and his own council urged him to step aside. Yet here he stood, at the very heart of the palace, a duke in title but not in strength. He had come to prove something today, to show that his weakness could not strip him of dignity. But fate, cruel and merciless, had other designs. As the king's youngest niece, Isabella, approached the dais, Julian rose. She curtsied, her gown sweeping like water across the marble. And for one dangerous moment, Julian's eyes locked with hers. She was not like the others. She did not stare at his limp, nor did she laugh behind her fan. Instead, she looked at him as if he were whole. That glance alone was enough to set his heart racing with a forbidden fire. But then came the accident. A child, playing too close to the edge, stumbled into Julian's path. In trying to steady the boy, Julian's cane slipped on the polished stone. His balance gave way. Gasps rose. With a helpless cry, he pitched forward, straight into the palace lake. The crowd froze. Velvet sleeves lifted to lips. Noblemen recoiled. Guards shouted orders, but none moved forward. They all knew the truth: Julian could not swim. His injuries made his limbs stiff, his movements sluggish. The Duke flailed once, twice, then vanished beneath the shimmering surface. And still, no one moved. No one, except her. Isabella's scream cut through the air like a blade. Without hesitation, she tore off her jeweled cloak, cast aside her crown of flowers, and leapt headlong into the water. Her gown ballooned around her as she plunged deep, her lungs burning, her arms reaching. In the shadows beneath the lake, she found him, eyes wide, lips blue, body sinking into darkness. She seized him with desperate strength, kicking upward, dragging the dead weight of the Duke toward the surface. They burst into daylight together, Isabella gasping, Julian choking. Her arms cradled him against her breast as she fought to stay afloat. "Help us," she cried. But the nobles only stared. None dared enter the water, as if fear of scandal outweighed the value of a man's life. Finally, a rope was thrown. Isabella clutched it with one hand, refusing to release Julian with the other, until at last, trembling and soaked, they were pulled to shore. The courtyard fell into silence. All eyes watched as Isabella held the shivering, coughing Duke, her face pale but fierce. She looked up at the nobles who had done nothing, who had let him drown. And in that silence, an unspoken truth was born. From that moment, Julian was bound to her. Not by choice. Not by duty. But by a forbidden gratitude that would soon turn into something deeper, darker, and infinitely more dangerous. That night, the palace halls buzzed with gossip. The Duke was saved by the king's niece herself, they whispered behind their wine cups. She clung to him as if he were her lover. Scandalous. If the king hears of it. But Isabella cared nothing for their whispers. She sat beside Julian's bed in the infirmary, her gown still damp from the lake, strands of her hair curling at her temples. She had refused to leave him. Julian stirred at last, his chest rising in a ragged breath. His eyes opened, weak but alive. "You," he whispered, his voice rough. "Why?" "Because no one else would," she replied. His gaze softened, but then hardened again with shame. "You should not have risked yourself for me. You would have died. Perhaps it would have been easier if I had." The words struck her like ice. She leaned forward, fire flashing in her eyes. "Do not say that. You are worth more than any of them." They watched, Julian. They all watched. I could not stand by and do the same. Her use of his name silenced him. Few dared to speak it so plainly, stripped of title, stripped of pity. It was as though she had reached into his chest and touched the wound he guarded most. Days turned to nights, and Isabella's visits did not cease. She brought him books when his body was too weak to rise, music when the silence pressed too heavily, and laughter when despair tried to consume him. She was warmth where he had known only coldness. But soon, warmth became fire. One evening, when candlelight flickered against the stone walls, Julian looked at her with an intensity that stole her breath. Why do you stay, Isabella?
Her heart thundered.
She knew the truth but dared not speak it. He was a duke, broken but noble, chained to a title and bound to politics. She was a royal niece, her future destined for alliance and duty.
To love him would be ruin. To love her would be betrayal. And yet, because I cannot stay away, she confessed.
The air between them thickened. His hand, scarred and trembling, reached for hers. She let him take it. It was the simplest of touches, but in that instant, the forbidden line was crossed. Their love grew in shadows. They met in the palace gardens at night, hidden among roses heavy with dew. They spoke of dreams they dared not share by day. He confessed the torment of living with a body that betrayed him. She confessed the suffocating weight of being a pawn in her uncle's court. And sometimes, when words failed, their lips met in stolen kisses that tasted of fire and freedom. But forbidden love is never safe. Rumors began to spread. Servants spoke of Isabella's nightly walks, of the duke's sudden brightness when she entered the room. The king's advisers whispered of dishonor, of scandal, of the danger such a union would bring. The more they tried to hide, the more peril closed in around them.
And still, they could not stop.
Because once a heart has drowned in forbidden love, it cannot be pulled back to shore. It was at the winter ball that everything unraveled. The great hall blazed with chandeliers, violins filling the air with trembling notes. Isabella moved among the crowd in a gown of silver silk, her eyes searching, always searching, until they found him. Julian, dressed in dark velvet, leaning on his cane, gazed locked on her as though no one else existed. They dared not approach, but their hearts beat in unison across the distance.
Then the king rose.
His voice silenced the music. "Tonight, I announce the betrothal of my niece, Lady Isabella, to Lord Renauld of Greythorn." Gasps rippled through the hall.
Isabella froze.
Julian's hand clenched his cane until his knuckles whitened. Lord Renauld stepped forward, smug and triumphant. He bowed before Isabella, who forced a curtsy though her heart shattered. She could not protest, not without defying her uncle, not without bringing ruin upon them both. That night, she fled to the gardens, her tears hidden by moonlight. Julian followed, his steps unsteady but determined. "You cannot marry him," he said, voice breaking.
"I have no choice," she whispered.
"If I refuse, my family will cast me out. And you, they will destroy you." "Let them," he said fiercely. "Let them take my title, my lands, my name, none of it matters if I cannot have you." She touched his face, trembling.
"And if we run?
If we defy them all? Where would we go?"
"Anywhere," he breathed.
"As long as it is with you." For one stolen moment, they kissed as though the world itself had fallen away. But even as their lips met, they knew the truth. The king would never allow it. The following morning, soldiers came to Julian's manor. He was accused of dishonor, of seducing the king's niece, of plotting rebellion. His titles were threatened, his freedom at stake. Isabella fought for him, begging her uncle for mercy, but her pleas fell on stone. The lovers were torn apart. Julian stood trial, forced to endure the stares of the same nobles who had once watched him drown. This time, they did not let him sink into water, they pushed him into ruin. But fate is not so cruel as to silence love entirely. On the eve of his exile, Isabella found him one last time. She slipped into his cell, her hands trembling as she pressed them against his. "They cannot take this from us," she whispered. "Not what we are. Not what we feel." Julian pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "Then let this be our vow. No matter the seas that separate us, no matter the chains they bind us with, I am yours. And you are mine." They kissed one final time, fierce and desperate, the kiss of souls who knew they might never meet again. And when the dawn came, Julian was gone, sent into exile, stripped of his name, his lands, his life. Isabella remained, bound in a gilded cage of duty, her heart forever elsewhere. But across kingdoms, across oceans, the story of that day lived on. The day the crippled duke fell into the palace lake, and while all others stood still, one woman leapt into the depths to save him. And in saving him, she doomed them both, to love, to loss, to eternity.